welcome everyone. I'm here today with two very special guests. First up, Mr. Priit Mihkelson. How are you today, mate?
Low baseline. I'm alive, so everything is good.
Low baseline. I hear that's these whoop strap wearing people. Is that what we're going from, or
Say again?
is that a whoop strap reference, or just
I
low
have no
baseline
clue what
in
the
general?
reference is, but yeah.
Okay.
So it's,
You're lucky.
Yeah, so,
You're lucky then.
yeah. Yes.
And I'm also here with Mr. Greg Souders of Standard Jiu-Jitsu fame. How are you today, Greg?
I'm fantastic, sir.
All right, excellent. So, very grateful to bring both of you guys together. It's been, organizing over 3 different time zones has been fun, and I'm glad we've been able to pull it off. And the topic for today in the, a next installment of the Great Grappling Debates will be something along the lines of the ecological approach or constraints-based learning, which Greg will represent, versus, I guess, Priit's just non-traditional approach in general. I don't know how we'll square that away, but we will begin. We'll begin to start and see where we can find agreement and disagreement. Again, very honored to have both of you guys here. I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy listening to this. And I think I'll start things off with Priit, as I know that you have, of course, always pushed back on many of the traditional teaching methods we see in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of the dead drilling, a lot of the, lack of aliveness, as we might call it, and you have experimented with many teaching methods. And I know that even recently yourself, I've seen on your Instagram stories that you have started to experiment, I might say, with the ecological approach or constraints-based learning. So I guess if you want to take me through your experiences with it so far, or your thoughts, and then maybe we see what Greg's take on that is.
So I think the first time I remember that we discussed it with Craig was even last year, something like October, whatever.
Yeah.
We exchanged some Instagram messages.
We
and
also
stuff.
spoke on the phone.
Yes. So it was like I don't know why I didn't pick it up earlier, so to speak. But actually, a month ago or 2 months ago, I started actually do classes using this method. It kind of took me, I don't want to jump into everything. Something is fashionable and you jump in and you jump there, you jump. So I really had to give it a thought. And so now I've been doing, I've been trying to do the classes already 2 months like this. And I was, I think, ready to kind of implement it, because I had a lot of questions, and then I was like, okay, I have to have my own experience with it, because certain things, I'm not saying that they don't make sense, but I have to see my own, how they work out, and maybe the problems I have, they just disappear because the method is this way. I don't have to actually have an answer for that. So, but I would give you like a devil's advocate, but I don't think we disagree with stuff, But why? Let's say there's 2 ways to think about it. It's ecological, but it's also constraint-led. And I know I watched Rob Gray, some recent short clip podcast about it, that there's some book about constraint-led method about golf, So it wasn't like ecological approach about golf. So the question is, because I don't know yet, so I'm asking, and I want to know, which one? I know that you Craig, said that constraint-led approach is a part of the ecological approach, and I understand that the triangle stuff, the task, environment, and the individual, and then we have constraints. But let's say, why in your mind we should not call it just constraint-led approach, and what does it in your mind makes it more that ecological is bigger and makes more sense?
Okay, so you could think of the ecological approach as being an umbrella. So anytime we're designing a learning practice, we're taking the individual, the task, and the environment into consideration when we design this practice, because we know that how that system interacts creates the emergent quality of behavior, right? It creates the behavior. So that's all that ecological approach is saying. That is, though, as that system interacts, behavior comes out. The constraints-led approach is a tool within that system. So what the constraints-led approach guys are saying is that we can control this system and we can guide the emergence of behavior by setting constraints either within the individual system, the environment or control the tasks. So it's just a way that we manipulate the ecological system to try to guide the emergence of behavior. So it's like I said, it would be like if grappling is a sport we all do, it can be defined as wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, same thing. So in the ecological approach, there are other methods that coaches use to try to control how behavior emerges. So that's the separation there in my mind.
But let's say if you say grappling, then so you said judo, wrestling, and stuff. There are different grappling arts, and we all do it. Basic rules and stuff, and we all do what we do. So
right.
Would you say like some people are more hesitant to call it ecological? They like it, maybe under umbrella of ecological. There's constraint-led. There's something else like separate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That do
For
you
sure.
find that some people will rather call it constraints? Because from talking my experience, the way I've been doing classes, I've been using a lot of constraint-led method. And for me, I'm, even like, I don't know, half jokingly, I'm like, I would like to call it constraint-led because this is what I'm using in my class. I know
right,
the environment and everything. So do you find that some like people like to call it and not even call it ecological or on constraint, then I guess they're wrong then they're not actually using the umbrella?
Oh no, I think what people call their practice is completely up to them. When I speak, I'm just trying to stay consistent with the science as I understand it. So
Okay.
if somebody knows that they're using the constraint-led approach specifically and they're not using anything else in the ecological toolbox, then that's great. Hey, at our school, we use a constraint-led approach to help our students acquire skill. That's plenty, I think. And you could even I think you could just learn that. So if the whole science of ecological psychology or ecological dynamics felt overwhelming, maybe we just focus on understanding how to use the constraints-led approach. Now, you would have to know a little bit about the deeper science to manipulate it well. But again, we could just use that tool. But the only thing, though, I think, is that we're limiting ourselves. So you've probably heard me say this before, guys. I say that a coach has two responsibilities. It's to teach what's known and to leave room for what is unknown. And I think we can use that same approach when we're talking about how we manipulate the science to design practice. So if we only have one tool, a constraints-led approach, we might be sort of not giving ourselves the opportunity to discover what is unknown. So because we're using a known method to create behavior. So I don't know. I think a deeper understanding of the science can help us discover new tactics to interact with our students that maybe the constraints-led approach doesn't answer.
But so what would be the let's say if you have like a ecological umbrella and one thing like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and whatever the judo example, one is constraint. What are other constraint-led method? What are other methods you would add under that umbrella that in your gym ecologically you use all of them? Because I know the constraint-led might have their restrictions and maybe cannot explain everything that you guys do. So what other method you use next to constraints that is like built, that it makes sense to be under the umbrella,
So another popular form of practice design is something called differential learning. Now this is something a little more difficult to understand because when they're using the word differential, they're basically talking about the variable that is random or we don't really have a clean answer for it. So an example of how it's used in other sports would be, let's say we're learning how to do a tennis serve. And as we know, even though there's lots of degrees of freedom in the arm swing, the tennis serve is a pretty like standard motion. It's like throw the ball up, hit the ball over there. Okay. So if somebody gets very good at the tennis serve and they want to change the way the serve is happening or make this serve immune to novelty or accepting of variability, they could do something like randomly blink while they're swinging the tennis racket. So blinking has nothing to, we don't know what the effect of blinking will be, but we know that it will change the way information is perceived as it relates to the tennis swing. So that's a form of differential learning, adding in randomness for randomness sake to basically perturb attractors so that new ones form. So we use that too when we create variation. So I've been wrongly using an IP term. I just found out by one of my friends, Josh Peacock, who's been talking to me about this. I've been calling differential learning, contextual interference. It's actually the same thing, but contextual interference is what IP calls the process, and differential learning is what the ecological psychologists call that variability of practice. And we can use differential learning to add in randomness to the practice to enhance learning.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I've been also checking out with some. I think Matt Kwan, I think he's Steve Kwan brother. I think he did Essential Jiu-Jitsu. He was talking about contextual interference. And so I checked out that term, and you use something else, yes, like a term-wise, but it means the same thing, like you said. And about that, so is there anything else, let's say, you have a contextual interference, you have a constraint-led method. Is there anything else under that umbrella that you should, like, people should know, and like what makes the ecological approach so fascinating? What else is there? Is there any other method?
Those two methods are the main ones that I've read about and learned about. I haven't gone any deeper in that field. So those are the two methods that I know are talked about heavily in the field, especially by researchers who deal with sport. So a lot of the researchers that I'm learning from interact with sports directly, and those are the two methods they say they either research or use.
That's kind of cool, because actually my next questions are about that. So because the contextual interference is more like there's random learning and block-based learning, yeah? So, and I think you guys do like, you have we talk about now the class structure, because that's also a bit confusing for me. And but because I've done, I've learned for, let's say the history is I've learned for chemistry when I was younger. But how I learned it was I went through the notebook, and then I left it be for a week. I did something else for a week, and then I came back to it and went over it again. I was like, this sentence seems new. I didn't notice that sentence before. So I read that notebook probably like 5-6 times during the period of breaks. And actually, I could memorize way better, because I was always, also I think in science they call it recall and everything else. You have to recall information and then it sticks, instead of just learning 1 month totally like chemistry, and your brain will explode because you can't take it. So you need the rest. So so what's been I don't know, bothering me or whatever, I disagree is no. So that it's like what you do is like a couple of things. So I want your answers about, because you say you always play the full game. So that's one thing I would want to discuss. The reasons why, and also the blockages. I know that Matt Kwan was saying from Essential Jiu-Jitsu that when you have a mount, let's say mount week. So next week you will teach like let's say a guard bottom, guard games, and then you repeat the last week also, So I would like to see like let's say first of all, what is the rule for playing the full game? Like, why would you have to play a full game? Is it your thing, or is it just something I can read about that why we have to play the full game only, or this is just like what you like to do?
Well, we have to define some of these terms, okay? So when Matt Kwan and I originally spoke, we had a conversation before our podcast, and I was trying to help him understand how I was formulating practice, and what I kept urging him and other people who were listening is you have to understand this for yourself and design your own practice. But I gave an argument for why I designed my practices the way I do. So first, let's talk about whole game. So whole game has to do with frequency, okay? So when you're dealing with the general class, you're dealing with people that train anywhere from 2 classes a week to 6 classes a week. Let's just say we put that on there. So if I'm teaching to a general room and it's non-specific, I need to take frequency into account. So the idea is that we need to see as much of the Jiu-Jitsu environment as we can so we can maximize frequency. We know there's a relationship with how frequently we do something and the skills that emerge from it. This doesn't mean we can't skip around, because we also know that learning is nonlinear. But the idea is that Jiu-Jitsu is so complex, continuous, that even by switching positions, it's an example of leaving something, one part over here and then facing another part over here. This would be a form of like skipping between lessons, but we do it within a class rather than within the day. Right? Because if I have a guy who's training 2 days a week, and let's say we focus 2 weeks on, let's say, mount and arm locks, he's never touched the guard for 2 weeks. So whatever organization that's happening around how the guard functions is going to start to get lost. Because there is, if the time between exposure is too long, no learning will happen. Now, I don't know what that metric is, because like I said, I'm dealing with so many different people, 2 classes, 3 classes, 4 classes. So I try to solve that problem, like I said, with frequency. So when I say whole game, we do standing situation, guarded situation, and pin situation. You can't really slice it up any thinner than that. So every day we do some situations from each, so that you always get to touch all the big situations. And again, this is for frequency purposes, so that we can keep exposing our students to the situations that we want them to develop skill in, regardless of what their training volume or frequency is.
So that is like your interpretation. That sense, like, is there like I know we're trying to also touch what science says, whatever. So there isn't any like rule about it that, let's say, you have to do the full game. Like everybody can like experiment with their own frequencies a little bit, but you have found that works best for you, and for people definitely like that training twice a week. It makes kind of sense to do this, But let's say, sure. But the question is like question from that is because you can slice it. I think it's even easier to slice the guard top and bottom. But let's say the pinning positions are like there's a side control top and bottom, there's mount top and bottom, and the back top and bottom. Yeah,
that's let's just say you can slice.
No, I mean I understand. You can slice it like that because so let's say it also I think what I'm trying to understand, you have an hour. So are you doing like 20 minutes stand up, 20 minutes pins, 20 minutes guard, or how are you gonna slice it? Because the question is, wouldn't be like 20 minutes too short for actually doing something, or wait for something to emerge? Like I know you do those, we talk about it, drills and stuff, whatever, and with live resistance. So wouldn't it make sense like half an hour, or do you feel like 20 minutes of stand up is already good for people, and then 20 minutes spins and 20 minutes guard?
Right. So there's a lot there. So first, Let me talk about how my class is organized so we can speak a bit more honestly. So in my foundations class, I don't do any standing engagement at all. I've said this on multiple podcasts. The reason why I don't do any standing engagement in the foundations class is for two reasons. One, it's the hardest aspect of grappling. It's the most variable, it's the most dynamic, and it's if you're not bought in to grappling and you don't like it, it's going to be very, very tough to build your physicality and mentality around that action if you're not into grappling. So I save that for the people who say, hey man, grappling's for me, I want to go deeper. So in my foundations class, we only do guarded situations and we only do pinning situations. But later in the day, we always do stand-up. From 8 to 9 is a standing engagement. So again, if you were like a full student, you would get each every day. But if you're just coming to the foundations class, you're only looking at guard and pin. And the second reason is most adults are scared of falling. If you're afraid of falling, you're going to act weird. And if you act weird, you're going to fall oddly and you're going to start breaking shit. Now, if I had children, if I had teenagers, I would start them to stand up right away, because kids tend to be a little more relaxed and loose when they're playing, and they're not as afraid. Their bodies are a little bit more resilient. So I would break that rule if I was dealing with teenagers. But either way, full-grown adults who have to go to work in the morning, I consider their lifestyle above developing the skill of jiu-jitsu. So again, that's what I do in my school. Now, as far as the time dynamic, 20-20-20, you guys understand that we don't know. We split things randomly anyway. What is it, 17 minutes of work? Is it 32 minutes of work? We're just doing what we can. All right. So if we have an hour to work within, we want to make that hour as functional as possible. Now, there could be many ways that you split this up, either in a day or in a week or in a month. But either way, frequency is going to tell you how good somebody gets. And you can look at any sport. Look at any sport that's played anyone's at a high level, they play frequently. No matter how they change their training, they're always doing something that relates to their performance environment or why they're training. And so if we're training to be good in all of those skills, okay, standing engagement, guarded engagement, pinning engagement, we have to touch those frequently. And again, the frequency, I do not know what the hard rule is. But based on my experiential knowledge, based on my experience here, the frequency in which we operate makes my students very effective in a general sense. Within 2 years, my blue belts can do all three engagements very well.
Okay. So, but that's what I mean. Like, I'm trying to understand the rules here, like, because it could be like 10 minutes, stand up and then something else and something else. So I guess you know what the goal is of the pinning situation. You know how much time it takes or whatever you want to. So it's not like blocks in that sense.
Yeah, so I do block it, but how I block it is like this. So in the foundations class, the first 30 minutes, that situation doesn't change, only its tasks change. So the tasks in the situation are variable, but the situation is blocked. This helps beginners kind of get comfortable with what they're doing, because blocking practice works well for people who are early in their development, but blocking practice has diminishing returns. So we can see that happen very quickly. You can even try it too. It affects them mentally too. If someone does something too often, they'll get bored and they'll stop paying attention. So again, blocking is effective for new players, but how much blocking you do will determine how novel the situation is or how variable it is.
And blocking, you mean like you put beginners, let's say half an hour, you put them to side control, like pin positions, and you work there. That's blocking, yeah? I would say. And second half would be the guard position. I guess you lock them into there.
Right.
And then in advanced group, you would even in those half an hour pinning situations, you would introduce different pins, I guess, yeah?
So in the advanced group, no. In the advanced group, we do one of each situation. So in the advanced group, so let's say we move on to the all levels class. We'll do a guarded, we'll do a guarded situation. We'll do a chest to chest situation. We'll do a chest to back situation. The fourth one will be basically what I want to do with the room. So I'll double down on which area I want them to have a deeper focus on. So all levels, there's nothing blocked in the all levels class. It's all variable. So there is no blocked portion in the all levels class. And even when we do standing 8 to 9, we do a non-connected engagement, a connected engagement, a grounded connected engagement, and then a free first to score from our feet. So we do that every day. So there is no blocking once we get out of the foundations class.
Yeah. So for me, that's the interesting part, because I saw that, I think the class you put on Instagram, you were doing like a leg lock stuff, defense and attacks, and you right away went to armbar or kimura, something was, I think the class was about that. And I think even within the class, I was very surprised that I don't know what was the time frame, because I think the video was 17 minutes long. So I don't know if it was a leg lock, something was like a half an hour, and then right away kimura. But in a video, it was like leg locks and kimura. What was 10 minutes?
10 minutes. So the entanglement round was 10 minutes. The figure 4 round was 10 minutes. The chest to back round was 10 minutes, and the chest to chest round was 10 minutes.
Okay, so but the question is, I understand what you're doing, so I'm not against that, so that's what I said. If I want to teach it, maybe those questions I have, they just go away, because I see how people actually behave. Because let's say if you do let's say figure 4 position, figure 4, 10 minutes, is it enough to actually what's the goal in the O-level class? Because in 10 minutes, let's say, I think many people would argue that it's impossible. Let's say, I'm not saying I would say that myself, but let's say in 10 minutes, it would be impossible to teach something like, okay, let's do something like a new setup or new this or new that. So. And I understand if you switch, there's a recall and stuff, and again you're switching and you're forcing yourself to adapt. But let's say if you would do like the sequences 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, what's the I guess the 10 minutes for you is the shortest amount that you feel that people can adapt and develop skill. So when do you, let's say, teach what traditional people would say, like teaching?
Well, I don't. Everyone thinks I'm lying. I don't teach. Like, that's not how I get skill to come out. So, like,
I know what you mean.
No matter,
because that's what also I discovered, because I've said this to my gym, and also I was in Netherlands this weekend, and I actually told people, like, I have existential issues right now as a coach, because I don't know anymore. I'm serious about it. It's not an overstatement, because I don't know right now what my job is anymore. Because the coaching is like, I'm not teaching per se anymore, I'm just putting people in constraints, and then they do something, and then I give them ideas, I guide them a bit here and there, and then they play a game again. So it's a little bit changed, like everything, little bit, it's changed everything for me, how I do it. I like it. I really enjoy it, but I'm just asking you, like, like a devil's advocate, that if you do 10 minutes pin to pin, is it like, are you guiding them also, or are you teaching them something new? Are you putting them in novel situations? So how's that learning traditional sense will happen?
Okay. So the issue is what people think they're teaching their students is wrong. You are not teaching your students arm locks and triangles and knee cuts. You're not teaching your students that. You're teaching your students how to grapple. Okay, grappling is just using our body in a gripping manner in any way towards the outcome that we set in our rules. And our rules we're trying to hold somebody still so we can strangle and break them. So that's all we're teaching. We're teaching people how to hold each other still so we can strangle and break them. We are teaching the receiving player to resist being held still and resist being strangled and broken. That's all we're teaching. So we're teaching through an opportunistic mechanism. We're giving them an opportunity to experience what it's like to try to hold somebody still so we can strangle and break them, or to resist being held still and strangled and broken. We're giving them an opportunity to experience that physical engagement. That's what we are. We're designing learning so they can do that. Okay. Now in the sport of jiu-jitsu, there are steady states that emerge, things that show up. Okay. So for example, let's use the guard because it's the easiest one to talk about. In the guard, we have closed guard, open guard, half guard. Okay. So we have two legs wrapped around a waist, legs open in a infinite degree from seated to belly up. And then we have half guards where two legs interact with one leg in a varying degree of connection. That's it. So what we're teaching in these stereotypical alignments is not the stereotypical alignment, not the move. We're teaching the function. So this is why variability works here. So in order for someone to learn how to use their guard, they have to learn the function of the guard, which at first is to make and maintain connection against resistance. So if you put somebody in a situation, that's their first skill. Make and maintain connection. Do not let them break your connection. Stay connected to them. Do not let them run past your legs, go through your legs, around your legs, however you want to name it. Again, that if you think like that, it makes sense. But if you think like I have to teach them X sweep, single sweep, it's impossible. All of a sudden we're like, dang, I can't do that in 10 minutes. Of course you can't. No one can, and no one does. But in 10 minutes, you can get someone to experience the functionality of their hands and feet as it relates to keeping somebody in front of them, which is what they'll always do every time they're on their back in that situation. That will never go away. So you do that every single day from a varying degree of guarded alignment. And then they start to understand the novel situations that exist between these degrees between these stereotypical naming points like closed guard, half guard, open guard. You realize it's the degree of functionality that they're learning, not the specificity of the alignment. And once you understand that, this becomes easy, right? So let's think of pins, for example. What is side control? Is it crossface and underhook? Or is it cradle and underhook? Or is it overhook and overhook? Is it when my chest is a little bit towards her hips, or is it when it's towards the shoulders? What if we're not at 90? What if we're at 87? What if we're at 84? What if my legs are a little bit spread out, a little bit close? What if I'm on my side? Which one is half guard? Which one is side control? See, if you start defining things by the degrees, you lose track of what you're doing. But if you define things by their degree of functionality, you gain everything. So pins don't matter as far as where they're lined up. Side control, mount, north, south, whatever. These are just the way we talk about it. What we really have to understand is the function of the degree of which we pin a body. So at 360 degrees around me, around your torso, I have to keep chest contact, keep your hips and shoulders covered, and get my legs involved as soon as possible. If you teach your students to do that every single day, it doesn't matter where they line up. They'll organize around that function. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I understand. That's what I mean. It's like, it was a little bit like a devil's advocate question, because I understand that, you can do like those spinning drills that, okay, don't let them go to the knees. You figure out how to stop that, and you look for figure four grips, and that in the future that allows you to do Kimura, and you can, I guess, train it specifically, just also finishing Kimura, or you can just teach people to get figure four, and then access Kimura is there later, Kimura, armbar, whatever. So would you also say, like, the way I said it right now, would you also play end games? Like if you teach people like, okay, pin them and look for figure four, that's the task. And then would you also have in some cases, or also in the same day maybe or whatever, okay, for figure four, now let's finish. And the way you want to finish, Tarikoplata, Kimura, armbar, whatever it is, let's do finish. So do you do end game also kind of plays?
100%. So let's use a figure four since you brought it up. So like I said, the first skill we have to teach our students, is how to make and maintain connection for the purpose of controlling distance. All right, so that's the first skill we have to learn. So if we're doing a figure four grip from, let's say, a side control pin, let's use that stereotypical alignment and grip. The first game we play is all about making and maintaining connection and managing distance. So when I say managing distance as it relates to the figure four and the pin, there are distances relative to the floor and relative to the body that we have to manage with closeness. Okay, so we get our students organized around keeping that grip by utilizing closeness. Okay, so our job in this game is to get the figure four grip. We're going to start here. Get as close to your opponent. You can give some lines of demarcation so they have some external focus of attention. And the effect is to stay on top and hold their partner down with the grip. Do not let them go. Stay on top of them as they move around, and they get to learn how to function around that grip. And then now you can, once they start getting good at maintaining connection for the purpose of controlling distance, you can start teaching them destabilization. So destabilization has two reference points. We have as it relates to balance and as it relates to structural integrity. So a bent arm is more twistable. A straight arm is more straightenable. So once they make and maintain connection, they start playing games where they destabilize that limb by disconnecting it from everything that can defend it. So, but remember, they can't go there unless they can first make and maintain connection. There's a relationship with time in position and functionality of engagement. So the way we first have to train time in position. Can you perform the foundational task of making and maintaining connection and staying here and producing this function? And then we can go further than that. We can say, okay, well, how many different things can we do while we're making and maintaining connection to this specific grip? And again, the next skill is destabilization. We have to destabilize that grip.
Okay, so that's what I mean. Like first, it's like, overall, whatever the sequence you do it, I guess, just, even keep the side control, against resistance. Then look for figure 4, and then you finish. But I would say like this: when is the time? Probably you say there's no time, but when is the time? Let's say you have figure 4 grip. How would I say it? When is the time you would actually teach? Let's say from the figure 4 grip. Let's say Tarikoplata, or you have a Kimura, you have armbar, Tarikoplata, everything else. So do your student, do they know it beforehand? Do you just don't teach them Tarikoplata because it's too specific? Or do they just go and figure out the Tarikoplata on their own and put it in a drill? So what kind of foundational knowledge they already have? Because I guess, get this and, Kimura, but they have to, the question is, how would you introduce Tarikoplata? Because I don't think, let's say, I don't know yet myself, how do I naturally make Tarikoplata emerge, in that sense. But it's a form of Kimura anyway, so.
Well, there are two things here that I think we need to focus on. So one is the idea that there needs to be knowledge before skill. That's nonsense. If that were the case, no movement would ever have emerged, ever. We don't start with knowledge. We don't show up in the world with a knowledge bank in our mind that we have to get to search through and then use that to discover things. We don't know what possibilities are. The only possibilities or movement patterns emerge from interacting based on our intentions, right? So the reason that we learn how to grasp things is because we intend to. The reason we learn how to jump is because we intend to. We don't have a knowledge base to do that from. So it's the same thing here with our grips. Now, we have a historical knowledge base of knowledge about what happens, right? So, but the student doesn't come with that. So again, we could start all over. Say, poof, we started back when no one ever knew how to grapple before. But we wanted to discover how to put our opponent on the ground. We would just start playing. And then once something happened, we would all look at it and be like, oh, that's interesting. Because we don't have knowledge. So, hey, something just happened. What happened in the world? Oh, let's try to replicate that. Oh, let's go about doing it. Let's just talk to each other about it. Let's watch it. What we're doing is we're trying to take what we see, this natural phenomena, and we're trying to talk to each other about how the hell we get it to happen again. No one seems to understand that that's what we're doing. They think that there was always this, Jiu-Jitsu Jesus, like delivering down these DVDs, packed with knowledge to start our students' engagement. We've never had that. It's always been people engaging in a task, surprised by the outcomes, and then trying to figure out how to get it to repeat itself. And so that's what we're doing here. But since we have this historical knowledge base, we put them in the situation that we want them to engage with. We give them the information they need to get started. Now, not knowledge, just information. What your intention is, okay? And then they develop their own knowledge of the situation, because knowledge about something is different than knowledge of something, right? This is like what you said when you were reading the chemistry. The reason when you read something you don't notice everything is because you have not engaged with it yet. It's just you're trying to get your gaining knowledge about. You're trying to remember something. But then once you go play a little bit or come back, then all of a sudden things become apparent because of its usage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the question would be like it's like, I don't know, trick question, whatever. So it's like when you have that knowledge of figure 4 and you know how to control it and destabilize it, like would you even show it? That's what I mean. I'm asking a very specific question.
So that's the second piece, the Tarikoplata.
Yeah. So would you even show it? Is it Is it even necessary? And would you just go like, guys, you can have this, and now play around? So would you introduce it? Do that drill that if people looking something to do, how to destabilize and how to finish the game.
So I try to keep myself tied to what Jiu-Jitsu's original philosophy was, right? It was a philosophy of efficiency, right? We have to use more of our body against less of our opponents so we can use less energy to create a big outcome. And I take this very seriously. So when I'm teaching my students to engage in a way, so okay, we're going to learn about this situation. We're going to start in the figure four grip, and we're going to develop some skills here. First, make and maintain connection to manage distance and destabilize it for an outcome that allows us to twist the arm, okay? Because we know historically that when you bend an arm, you twist it, it can damage the arm. So I want my students to experience that. But do we need to teach them all the movements that have ever happened from that situation to make it effective? Because to me, that's inefficient teaching. So why would I have to show, why don't I show all the platas? Fuck the Tarikoplata, the omoplata, all the platas. Why not just get them on an arm and teach them to effectively hold it, destabilize it, and break it, however they can. And so that way, if some person likes to use their legs to do it, great. If I got a big muscle guy who likes to use their arms to do it, great. If I have a guy that doesn't like that but likes to use it to create chest-to-back contact, sweet. If I got a guy who likes to use it to get head and arm strangles or turning it into a straight lock, great. But the thing is, you have to teach them how to engage with their subject matter first so they can produce a function. And then they can explore that function once they have it stabilized into a movement solution. But we're trying to put the cart before the horse. We're trying to show them things or give them problems that they've never. We're trying to give them solutions to problems that they've never experienced, and we're calling that teaching. It just doesn't make any sense.
I somewhat agree with you. So I'm just trying to go pick your brain a little bit and nitpick here. So I'm still going after that Tarikoplata, So because I know what you mean. In that sense, I agree with you that if you learn to control and destabilize, and you get the arm behind the back, how you finish. I'm just trying to ask how it's built in your gym, because also in a way it could be a safety issue. If let's say if people don't know Tarikoplata, let's say it's very specific, but let's say it this way, and because if they know the Kimura, they recognize the Kimura and they know how to tap. But let's say if you don't know Tarikoplata, it's still maybe same feeling, arm goes behind. But let's say, are your students discovering those on their own? They're seeing matches, they're studying themselves, what more is there. So your job is done when you're teaching them to get this arm behind the back, and then look for a constriction of movement because some pain kicks in. And how do you get there? It's your choice. So, but I would say it would be in my head would be, okay, you can do it with this. Oh, actually, you can actually put the leg over, grab like this. Okay, now explore. So are you saying you would just let them figure it out, and maybe somebody picks it up from the matches, from the YouTube something, and that's how the Tarikoplata comes to a gym? Or do you just introduce it somehow through some principle so they could explore all that is? But because I understand you that it's if you get a Kimura, Kimura grip, whatever, figure four, is it our job really to teach you all the 10 submissions from there? I agree with you, because it just creates unnecessary complexity, because they have to get good at all those submissions, and it just takes time. And is it really efficient? I agree with you. So I'm just saying that how would you introduce Tarikoplata, or how it happens in your gym? Somebody just picks it up randomly, or figures out that, oh, I can actually put the leg over. So it's I know it's nitpicking. So, but how would you answer that?
Okay, so I try into multiple stages. So first, what I do. So I create an environment so my students can experience the foundation of a thing. And the way I define the foundation of anything that we do is those three things: make and maintain connection, manage distance, destabilize. And again, in each situation, those objectives change. So again, if we're using a guarded situation, managing distance would mean create it, or move your partner in a specific direction relative to that distance. If we're talking about a submission, it means take away space. If we're talking about pins, it means take away space. So again, make and maintain connection, manage distance, destabilize. That's the foundation of everything that we do in the grappling environment when we first do it. So that's the first thing I need my students to understand. No matter whether we are connected to center mass in manipulating it, whether we're connected to periphery in manipulating it, we have to make and maintain connection, manage the distance relative to the task, and destabilize relative to the task. That's what we're doing first. That goes a long way. It goes a long way. You can do that for 2 to 5 years without showing anything specific as you're mentioning. Now, so again, that's what I'm teaching people. Whatever connection we use, we're going to learn about it through its function, not its options. The options will emerge. Those are solutions. Okay. First, an effective option, or excuse me, effective solution will emerge. And then as people engage more in the class, their individual constraints will start to take over. Their creativity, the shapes of their bodies, the way the students are talking to each other, interacting with each other. They're learning from one another by watching what's possible. When things are done to you, oh, that's fucking cool, man. I'm going to try to do it that way too. And so again, they're all experiencing that same foundation, but they're all expressing it differently. And those difference in expression, what creates those novel and new, unique movement solutions. And in a room, that's where it came out originally, right? Just like it is doing here. So we run into those historically created positions by accident, just as they came out historically by accident. It's the same thing. So now, let's go on to the video watching. Watching other people do a behavior is a wonderful thing. This is how we learn in the world. When you're running around playing with your friends and you see them jump over something in a cool way, I might want to try that too. It might work, it might not, right? So as far as going out, searching for information, searching for possibilities, searching for inspiration and new action potentials by watching high-level players go, by watching a DVD and seeing a guy do a thing in a different way, this is all good. Okay, this is how we inspire the mind to be creative. We learn from each other. But that's not how the movement is created. That's done ad hoc. So that's done after the experience. This is why traditional teachers get frustrated. Like, I showed this to my student. They drilled it 50 times, but they still won't do it because you never taught them how to make and maintain connection. You never taught them the function of what they're doing. So they can't copy your silly movement pattern because it's not relevant to them. Anyway, so that's how I'd answer it. So I'd say that, again, I'm not teaching. Go ahead.
You're avoiding my answer.
What am I avoiding? So please, let's highlight that so I don't avoid it.
Yeah, no. But it's just I'm trying to ask it because I know what you mean. So that's always been the struggle as a coach. You have this what they call it information processing way of dealing and teaching them specifics. You have the ecological approach. So what's I think what I'm trying to get to, like I said before, like what is my job? I understand what you said, maintaining connection, doing this, I understand. So then the question is
what you teach, like what moves you pick.
Yes, so I'm interested also like let's say I know you said that I think it's misleading a bit because you said you don't teach submission specific submissions. Somebody right. Just in the ecological approach Reddit said, I think, and we in the Instagram, I think we went back and forth with this. If it's less variables, you can teach specifics also, yeah, in that sense.
You can be more discrete.
Putting people in a discrete positions, and it's only one option, So for me, this also counts as techniques because we haven't agreed on definition. What is a technique? For you, it's a step-by-step instruction. No. Yeah, instruction. For me, it's like the end with the arm bar is also technique.
No, that's not
okay.
A technique is a solution to the problem. However you go about solving that problem is your technique. Okay.
That's what what do you call armbar?
What do you mean?
Is it not technique?
How we get the armbar is the technique, but the technique of the arm lock is different every single time you do it for every person that has ever done it. I'm saying this is why I use the word invariance. This is why I use the word invariance, okay? Because there are things that don't change about arm locks, but there's a vast array of things that do. So what does not change about arm locks is first how we go about getting them, okay? The first thing we have to understand about how we get to arm locks is we have to have access to the base joint. We have to create access to the shoulder. If we cannot connect to our partner's shoulders, we can't start the arm locking process because we can't hold the limbs still. Okay? And now all the ways that we accomplish this have to do with elbow positioning. How we move our partner's elbow in a specific direction to gain access to that shoulder. Okay, so elbow manipulation for the purpose of shoulder access. Once we gain shoulder access, we have to isolate it, immobilize it from everything else so that we can straighten it. So that's the invariant process by which we find arm locks, but that process changes constantly. So when we say there is a technique for arm locks, we're lying, because there isn't. Like, there's a guy named Party Bear. You should check him out. He's a European PhD, and he's a neuroscientist. He's also a black belt. He does not like Gordon Ryan, okay? And so what he did was he went and he watched all Gordon Ryan's instructionals, and then he went and watched all his matches. And he showed where Gordon Ryan says what he does, and then showed a match where he does not do any of what he says. And this is true all the time. Science is showing this again and again in every sport. Performers are saying they're doing something, but when they look at it, they're not doing what they're saying. There's the consistency that we think we understand, we don't. And so in that's what I mean. I don't teach an arm lock technique, okay? I teach how to access the shoulders, attach to the shoulders, isolate and immobilize limbs. And the reason I say it like that is because the ways that we do it, the techniques, are ever changing from person to person, moment to moment.
Yeah, I know you're like, it's a very.
So the reason you think I'm avoiding it is because I'm not saying this in a harsh way. I'm sorry. I just got to be direct. It's because of your lack of understanding, not mine. So
I don't mind it. Go.
And the crazy thing is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to overtalk. I really want to make my point so you don't think I'm avoiding the question. You're just asking me a question I can't answer, because the way that you're framing it is assuming something. You're begging the question. You're assuming that these things are true. And I'm telling you, I teach without it, and I'm getting the result that people say that I can't get. It's like oh my God, like I don't know. I want to be better at saying it, so you understand exactly what I'm doing.
I have I'm very famous for having communication problems, so I understand what you're going through, because it's the way, saying it's important. But so it's my fault to not able to ask a better question, because I know what you mean. So the question is, we're gonna a little bit go around here because it's interesting.
No mind.
Yeah, no, it's like, that the fun part was that we were trying to also, Sonny, we were trying to have a discussion, like even in WhatsApp, whatever, Instagram, and somebody posted like in a comment, let's do a podcast, I was like, oh, why not? So this is just my private time talking to Mr. Souders, and then it's like in a podcast form. So it's like, I'm very happy.
I've been asking you to call me for months.
Yeah.
I'm like, stop being busy and call me. Stop being busy and call me.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to talking to you for months.
Yeah, now we have a podcast, so I can actually pick your brain, and it's like public. So, but
anyway. Fuck the public, because you know how they treat you like shit. They treat me like shit. Whatever.
Yeah,
fuck what they think.
I'm very like familiar with that. But let's say, so let's go back to I know what you mean about that. So that's what I mean. It's like terminology. It's like when you say you don't teach techniques, I know what you mean. But then it has to be like what other, traditionalist, when we had this debate, So Sonny was saying it's more traditionalist. So I was, this is like the language we have to develop, because what they think and people usually think about technique. And when you say no technique, it's very confusing, because in that sense you will do a technique, but you don't say it's technique because it's not a technique for you, and you're teaching those things to make it happen. I know what you mean. You don't teach specifics, but I would say like this follow-up question. So I guess you teach this way the armbar, Kimura entanglements, the triangle, blah blah blah. Yeah. What are those kind of fundamental submission positions that you expose your people in a beginning? What are those? Like,
great.
Let's say.
Okay. So if we want to think about how we make and maintain connections for specific functions, we think about where we connect. So we have peripheral connections. This is like where we start, like let's say on a limb. So let's say we're attacking a leg, we go from hip down. So we're doing work where we're teaching our students how to attach to the hip, and then we're performing functions on the leg that we're isolating. We do the same thing with arms. We're going to start at the line of the shoulder, right? So we're starting at the on the periphery on the arm, and we're going to manipulate it for specific ends. We know that arms straighten to break and they twist to break in varying degrees. Okay, so again, we put them in on the periphery with an attachment that allows them to perform that base function of making and maintaining connection. And then we teach them how to destabilize the limbs, okay? And we play different games so they can understand all the nuances and novelties that exist as we're trying to isolate the limb, immobilize the limb, and break the limb. And so we give the defending player tasks to help resist the attacking player from doing that. And so as the attacking player tries to perform their outcome with task focus, they're doing it against resistances, and this is what formulates the solution or the technique. I don't tell them what it is. They formulate it based on an invariant understanding of the function of the engagement I put them in. Okay, and we do the same thing with necks, right? So we have what we call arm-in strangles. This is where the arm is included in compression, and we have naked strangles where there is no arm included in compression. And we start our students in alignments where they experience that too. And then what we do is we'll play games where we can make it more complex, because we know we can turn twisting arms into straight arms, and we can turn either into arm in. We can turn the resistance to arm in into naked. So the thing is this is just the way the human body moves as it tries to resist being held still. And there are steady states that emerge within this system that we can use to twist, straighten, or compress our opponent to strangle or break them. And so we use these stereotypical alignments as a starting point to teach functionality. But the deeper the student gets into functionality, the less these stereotypical alignments start to make sense, because you realize that there's degrees of functionality, not specificity, right? There's not this one way to do it. There's a million ways. There's an infinite ways, even if they know how small they are. So that's how we teach it, right? And then we have center mass connections. So we'll start at the hips, we'll start at the shoulders without the limbs being isolated, and then we work towards isolating them.
Right? Yeah, I've seen the arm triangle class. You made that example.
Well, real quick, I want to make a big point here.
Yeah,
those videos I made them for you guys, because when I first talked to my guy who did the video, he was like, "You can't use your language. You have to find a way to communicate with them so you can show them what you're doing." And so I was like, okay. So what we did was we did simple, agreed upon community language to start, so that we could show you that you could drill something live. And that was our first intention. Our first intention was to show that you can train with full resistance starting from day one. We wanted to introduce that to the world. And then as we started introducing that, we introduced varying degrees of game that we could achieve that with. Now we're trying to show what we're really talking about, which is difficult to understand. And so we tried to do it in stages so we can introduce things to you guys, because we're doing something different. Not different as far as, we have a new jiu-jitsu, but we're using new language and a new methodology for teaching that isn't shared community-wide yet.
Yeah, I understand. It's because, I'm not so much traditionalist, because I guess I have a SPG background. Maybe you're familiar with Matt Thornton and stuff, and aliveness and everything.
I am.
So they tried. That's another thing we could maybe, if we have time, we can touch, because I come from the background, the progressive resistance, and they were kind of the pioneers back in the day in 2000, whatever, that were trying to go a little bit more scientific about stuff. And I guess somebody just in my gym also said that somebody from their part, SPG, I left SPG in that sense, 2018, but somebody also was in some podcast and even claimed that SPG, what they do, is an ecological approach. I would say when I was there, I wouldn't agree with that, but maybe, this is 2023, so maybe something has changed. But also, that we said you said you're gonna talk me out of the progressive resistance kind of idea, but we'll see. We go around, so I'm trying to formulate my questions. So,
okay.
But I would just quickly ask you: do you know what Matt Thornton has done and all the aliveness stuff? And are you familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I read his.
So the question is: do you agree that it is an ecological approach, or do you agree? Do you feel like no? This is. I think their aim was right, and then ecological approach is a bit different. I'm not saying to be, like you said, it's not different for different sake. We're just doing, different language and everything else. We're doing something else, but it's not, like you said, it's not like, it's some revolution stuff happening here. But how do you compare what you do and what they're doing?
So I've looked at a lot of their stuff, and I watched a lot of the guys, the SPG guys, and the games they make, and all this stuff. And um, one, I don't think they're being as honest as Matt maybe. Matt Thornton might have been directly on this and doing it like the way that he said he does. But some of his other guys, I don't think they're being fully honest with how they approach training. But the thing is the ecological approach. I have to try to like convince you guys of this. It is just a theory of information. That's it. So if you're creating a practice design and you're not creating it around the central idea that information is direct, then you're not using the ecological approach. Okay? So if you're not doing that, you're not using it. I don't care if your practice is live or not. Okay? Mm-hmm. Again, the ecological approach is just a science of information that tries to develop a theory that information comes directly to the organism because the organism is interacting in an environment. And all of the information that we need to pick up to create a movement solution is already present. That we don't have to interpret it, that it's not some mental model we're making in our head. That's what the ecological approach is suggesting. So if they're not using that theory to inform how they're designing practice, they're not using it. I don't care how live their practice is. Okay? If they're telling their students how to do things, put your arm here, put your hand here, move it like this, they're not using it. Okay? Now, the second issue is aliveness. I looked it up. There's a scaling problem because there is no objective form of aliveness. It's just this vague idea of it. There must be some resistance. A friend of mine, Josh Peacock, has tried to challenge that by creating what he considers a more objective view of what that means, what he calls a scalable live practice, which is a much better definition than aliveness, and it's more informed by reality. So that's the issue. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with that so I watched also the Rob Gray, some short, I think it was 16, 17 minutes video about the misconception about the ecological method and what, even the branches, there was a tree, picture, branches are even like colliding from different, information processing and ecological methods. Mm-hmm. But I think the underlying, what he was saying, the roots are like what we're trying to do and what the information process trying to do, So that that is what you said. That's what differentiate them. We might use same methods sometimes, mm-hmm. But even let's say, like you said, you don't give direct. Maybe I'm paraphrasing you that you don't give direct feedback. But Rob Gray was saying you can give direct feedback and you can do anything, but it has to be aligned with what is the what is your idea? What is that direct? He was saying bend your knees or something. So it could be a direct feedback, but also what's the underlying principle of what you're trying to do, That's
right.
So he was saying about, yes.
I just don't give solution. Different thing.
Yes. So it's because a lot of them, I think for my other coach, because, in our gym, I'm lucky because Tom, our competitor, there's also a coach, and Ronald, my buddy, who I do videos with, I run the gym with. We're all on board on this, let's say approach. And we want to understand it better. So usually sometimes, if you have bigger gyms, some people are, F this shit, and I don't like it. It's so weird. And so I'm happy that we both are we all three are on board and we're trying to figure it out, because I think for Ronald was very hard to understand. And I think the Rob Gray video kind of a little bit fused the situation was that, you don't teach specifics, or what do you teach then? Or so a little bit like, I think in a lot of people, the way also the bluntly, Greg, you also say it, no techniques, no drills, and no something. So it's jokingly, I think it's meant to irritate people. I know you have your language and stuff, and sometimes I even feel like you do it purposely, because I think you have to know.
I poke the shit out of the bull. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm like, you're not stupid. You have to know what you're doing, and just constantly saying no drill, no technique. I think you do it purposely. So,
well, let me get this. So I'm trying to break an expectation and a myth in our community. Okay, so drilling, as it's traditionally understood, is static drilling, right? So basically, we go through these, we repeat a movement, and that's supposed to teach us. Like, it's bullshit. We don't do that. We don't repeat movements. Our form of drilling is called repetition without repetition. Okay, the idea is that we face a problem and we expose ourselves to a varying degree of problem. We try to solve them on a daily basis. Okay, so we repeat the game that we play, the whole game, but it's not for like some idealized movement. We just keep playing the game. We repeat without repeating. Okay, so that's what our drilling is. Okay, if we were to call it what we do drilling, everyone's like, oh yeah, of course you start on the hip, so it's drilling. Or yeah, you said stay above your partner's hip, so that's drilling. Well, then everything's fucking drilling, man. Okay, but what I'm saying is that we don't do static drilling. We do not show a movement solution, and we do not practice that movement. That we don't practice the movement. Okay, we don't do that.
I understand. So yeah, that's what it's like. For me, it's I think I saw you saying like you want to get rid of that word of drilling, and I think somewhere maybe you wrote that something, but I think it was something that you don't like the word. Because for me, it's like. Yeah, I understand both, because we'll see what the terminology end up being after the shake-up, because it could be so it could be like dead drilling, resistance drilling, task focused drilling, or it could be just the drilling is like it's like yoga these days. Yoga doesn't mean anything these days, because it's like hatha yoga, it's beer yoga, it's hot yoga. It's like when you say karate, karate means 1,000 different things today. You have to really specify what you mean. Like drill is also like most people think. I'm like SPG background, so for me it's always mostly resistance drilling, and but we call it. We can go there next to like progressive resistance. But for me it was never like that. But I know like how a lot of gyms are actually training with the left and right 10 reps and whatever. So that's the drilling, like a mindless. But for me, I think it serves purpose when you do conditioning or something, specific sports conditioning could be useful, because it's like create certain, you're still training in a related environment. In that sense, I would say if I would find some use for it. No, I mean, like if you find, because then it's easier with those drills. It's easier to keep the heart rate up. If it's very like sparring, then it's harder to keep like say the heart rate in a second zone. With drills and stuff, it's easier. You do still sport related motions, and you can keep your heart rate in check if you want. If you don't want to do running for 45 minutes, So I find that there maybe that kind of dead drilling, speed drilling, whatever could be useful. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying like it's easy to manipulate the heartbeat, like heart rate for steadier purposes.
Well, just otherwise, have either of you guys ever watched any of my athletes compete? Anybody? The Corby brothers, Alex Nguyen, Romero Jimenez, Noah Schaffner.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen one of my students get tired? Have you ever seen one of my students stall or stop fighting? No.
That is a different. No. But I mean,
never.
So, I agree with that also, because the way I understand you, because the way I've been doing also classes right now. And the way it's, from the get-go, it's a potential of full resistance, full speed. And I understand what it does. I'm just saying, like, dead drilling could be useful, like, there, like, if you play for conditioning, because I think this way of training, like we're talking right now, it's in the form of conditioning in itself, So I'm not saying... Then. Yeah.
So what would be the difference between... So then what you're doing is you're saying that you want an effect, right? So you want the heart rate to stay at a specific thing. So do anything. Why does it have to be drilling with your partner? Why can't it be on the bike or running or jump roping, or why don't do it all?
No, that's what I mean.
So what if by doing that, what you're saying is you're just saying all you're talking about is the effect of getting the heart up. So we're not talking about jiu-jitsu anymore. We're not talking about training anymore. We're talking about something else.
So I'm saying like when you could argue, because I'm not a physical education coach, I might talk out of my ass also here, but I would say like because if you do let's say in my mind it makes sense more. Let's say if I do a like 20 double leg, to keep my heart rate up, it's more jiu-jitsu specific conditioning for muscles than I mean like let's say for running,
But that's not how conditioning works.
Yeah, so but I'm talking about heart rate, if I can keep it up, because I know that one our guy was training for competition. We had a big, like a big foam, pretty big foam cube in a gym. So for 20 seconds, he had to push it with double legs, and he was doing the lactate tolerance class, or something. So he was doing that with double leg. He was pushing it with double legs. So it was like sport specific move, but we were training lactate tolerance, We have short breaks and blah, blah, blah,
No, yeah, I get that. Glycolytic training, I get it. No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, first you're using a double leg, but there's no legs in front of you. So how are you double legging? You mean slamming your knee on the mat, just moving forward?
Yes, I know what you mean.
You're using a stereotypical motion that has nothing to do with double legs to teach a double leg. So see how non-specific it is? It's so like far from the sport, it's insane. Do you know why wrestlers put their knee on the floor when they shoot? Can anyone answer that question? I can.
To low level?
But why?
No, so
why?
So tell me.
Yeah, you go.
No, I went to one of you two. Come on. I'm not the only guy here with knowledge.
Lower their hips, get their hips lower than their opponents.
Okay, but why do they have to do it that specific way with their knee?
Because their knee is attached to their hip.
No. George St. Pierre doesn't do that when in MMA. Does he?
Because their stance is higher.
He goes, no.
So it doesn't mean anything exactly. It doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as a double leg motion. Okay? Because the stance will change how the motion emerges. If you watch a 135-pound wrestler shoot doubles versus a 240-pound shoot, they look completely different. If you watch George St. Pierre shoot doubles, it looks very different. And so the thing is again, that's why you can't use a jiu-jitsu movement to condition, because there's no such thing. The movement is it has a direct relationship with its functionality. And that functionality is directly tied to the task it's performing in the environment. And so this is why you can't do that, because it literally is nonsensical. You might as well just have to drop the knees and push the bucket or push the block.
I know what you mean. So only thing I was saying, like, it would, let's say, I understand exactly what you mean. Only thing I would say, like, dead drilling would make sense maybe then, but also you argue it wouldn't make sense even then. So I can... I'm not saying we agree to disagree. I'm saying I understand what you mean, but I was just finding even like reason to do a dead drilling in that sense. You know, like, why would you do this move? It's because there's something to be said. Like, let's say if you do, I don't know what the phenomenon is, because I think if you do certain, like, you know, somebody puts a leg over, you go under in a guard, you put leg over, you put under. There's something, you know, I say something stupid probably now, something like muscle memory that doesn't exist, but certain automation that yeah. If you're familiar with that, you know the move, you can do it in action, because like there is because the phenomenon, I don't think we looked, maybe, let's say, the phenomenon that, I don't know how to explain it right now, let's say it like this, okay. Is when they done the dead drilling, you know, all the guard passing drills left and right under the legs and stuff, what you see in YouTube. And when they get into the, let's say, real situation, something kicks in. I know the timing and rhythm and everything is different because it's a live situation and it's never like just leg over, leg over, leg over like they do in a YouTube. But certain people are like, their movement, whatever the patterns are better because they certain base level of movement is there. And they can maybe navigate the chaos better, something like this. I'm not saying this is what we should do, or this is not like justification for dead drilling. I'm saying like there's something there that I know that people who have done those things, the position triggers them somehow if they get to that position, and then they navigate there. So there's also there, but I don't know how to explain it.
Well, I do. So they're doing that random motion, okay? So let's say they're really competitive guys. They're like, man, I'm going to win tournaments and I'm going to do this drill and this is my move. What they're going to do is when they get against that situation, they're going to spam that. They're going to think that works and they're going to throw themselves at it. They're not going to pay any attention to the situation. They're not going to try to read it. They're not going to try an efficient way to do it. They're just going to spam that movement pattern that was taught to them by their coach until they get it. You see this. This is what most modern black belts look like. They're move spammers. They don't actually understand what they're doing. They just know that if they throw themselves in a specific way at their opponent with a high enough force and movement rate, they'll probably break their opponent. This is typically how people get past the guard. It's not with this nice, beautiful sequence of events that based on understanding and reading the situation as it arises. It's spamming. So that's the effect.
Okay.
You're forcing someone to do something in training, and they're trying to replicate their training in the performance environment. Now, to a degree, this works because everything really works. But what we're saying is, how can we control this? How can we create some physical certainty here? How can we train our athlete in such a way that he can reproduce a known outcome, a low energy cost, a consistent outcome in a timely manner? How can we get this? That's what we're trying to do. That's what training is. Like, so if you want to, I'll use the squat example because it's easier. If you want to be the world's best squatter and you want to squat 1,000 pounds, there is a process that we go through to strengthen the body to do this. If a jiu-jitsu community were training a squatter to do this, they would never make it. We would have people putting PVC pipes in their back. We would have people doing like 100 squats. They don't know how anything comes out. Okay, they don't know how to manipulate the system to create the outcome. So training is utilized specifically to create a performance outcome. Right now, it's just throwing shit at the wall. That's what our community is doing, just throwing shit at a wall. And hopefully something sticks. Since everybody's doing that, it works, right? It's just like 1940s basketball. Just look it up. Just look it up. It'll make you be like, yeah, Greg, you're right, man. Fuck, that was horrible.
Right. I love when you talk dirty. So.
No,
so
man. I'm super passionate about this shit. I know. Before coming here today, I was like, Greg, you're going to be the calmest, you're going to speak slowly, and you're going to speak clearly today. You're not going to be your typical self, right? So I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. Thanks for being patient.
Not happening. Yeah. So it's just like it's a big statement. Everybody's throwing shit on a wall. So it's like we'll see. I understand exactly what you mean. I never take anything you say personally. I have to think about it. But I've seen the reactions you get. When you say something like this in Reddit or some other stuff. So it's interesting that I think when people see this and then. We get some responses again, like Craig is like a-hole again.
Whatever. But the thing about you, and I think the reason you don't take it personally is because, one, I'm not attacking your character. I'm not saying, Priit, you're a dumbass. I'm not saying that at all, because I think the exact opposite. You seem like a guy who's trying to understand better what they're doing. Based on our first phone conversation, We talked for 2 hours and just chatted differently about different things. So again, I'm only aggressive in my defense of what I'm doing and with my understanding. That's all that is coming out, right? I guess if you think you're a genius and I say what you're doing is throwing shit at the wall, I might be right, and I might offend you, but you got to defend your fucking stance. Otherwise, you are just throwing shit at a wall. But again, you're I don't mind. Anyway,
let's before we get to not back to track some other questions when we talked about I'm really interested because I guess I would say I agree with you when you say you can talk me out of the progressive resistance because right now I don't because when I change now I do my constraint-led approach. I don't use progressive resistance anymore, and I understood the deficiencies of that. Because I had to always explain people, okay, go harder, don't do this, go lighter a little bit, give them this, because people had zero context what the resistance should be, because they were trying to understand, in their head, what happens in a sparring. Okay, let's mimic that, but sometimes they don't have context what actually works. So give me your reasoning and stuff that you said you could prove me that progressive resistance is like dead training. So okay. What would be your argument? Say that.
Okay. So the first thing is we can't calculate it. We have no way to know whether we're actually being progressive or not. So if we try to define it as an external thing separate from the environment, we're already missing the point, because we don't have a mechanism to do so. We can't say what any of these degrees of resistance are. You can put fancy words on it if you want. You can call it integration and utilization or whatever you want, but it doesn't mean anything because we can't define it. Because if I were looking out at my students and I would say, okay, see what resistance they're going at? Is that the integration phase or is that something else? Are they going at 37% or 56%? So we have no way to measure that, okay? Or in that way anyway, as an external objective measure. We don't have that. But what we do have is the understanding that it's always progressive. Resistance is always relative to the task. What we're confusing is someone's misunderstanding of how much resistance or effort they need. See, beginners don't know how much they need because they've never done anything before. So they have to play around with inputs. Okay, they have to maybe I'll go hard here, maybe I'll go. So they don't know yet. And so we as coaches sometimes are uncomfortable with that because we want it to look a certain way. We judge that based on our ego, how we think things should be. But we have to understand that messing around with effort and resistance is how somebody attunes to the information present and coordinates around it. So, but again, it's already progressive. Because if you take a new person and put them in a room for an hour, the energy outputs will change throughout the whole day. First, they might be really hard, but then they might be a little slower because they should get tired. Then they may pick it back up again, but then maybe they won't. So it's already happening. So to say progressive resistance it's redundant because resistance is progressive because the energy system waxes and wanes as we perform physical tasks and experience fatigue. So what they're really trying to say is they want to control the energy output so they can get a more intelligent outcome, or they want someone to act more intelligently. But we do have objective ways to do that, and this is where my argument is. If we want to control output, we control things that affect output. So time is one of them. Shorter time, higher output. Longer time, lower output. And that goes throughout the class too. Also, the variability within a given situation changes output, right? Or input. So if I'm already in a position where I'm holding you still, the amount of effort that I have to put in to hold you still based on my skill level is a little bit reduced, right? But if I'm having you stand on the feet and I say, go get his legs, that's going to be high effort. So again, we can manipulate resistance and make it progressive, if we can even say that, by using more objective things like time, like constraints, right? Controlling the situation. But we can't measure it as an ideal because it doesn't exist and because it already is happening.
So what for me was, I just did also, like, so we did like a reverse underhook, like a ghost escape, what the internet calls it. So what was interesting for me that, back in the day, I would teach it differently. So right now we could go like from first minute, we could go like, full resistance drills. It was basically like,
can I ask
okay.
One question real quick? Just one question. Yeah. I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt. What is full resistance?
Exactly. I know you're going to ask that.
But wait. How do you know that they're using all their power to resist it?
No, because they start seeing red and the bodies start dropping, Greg. Come on.
So yes,
you know it when you see it.
No, but I don't.
So in that sense, I know what you mean. So I don't have right now the language to, but I think you know what I mean. But like really hold. Don't. But what I mean like this. So the warm up, let's say for a reverse underhook ghost escape was. I did it like this. We had a chest to chest, and the person had to hold the arm in the cross face area and the underhook area, and you had a reverse underhook and you can get out, because it wasn't squeezing, it wasn't like cross face underhook, and people had easy time to start doing the reverse underhook escape and got out, Another person could only resist with the body motion because he couldn't attach anything. He could just post on the mat and then manipulate his body to make it heavier. And I was really surprised because I was like, they can actually go because the right body motions emerged because they were really trying to stop the reverse underhook. And the game was rigged in the way that because the bottom person always got out because the top person had the limitations. But this was the drill you could do easily for like a first minute of the class, and it was right away the potential of the, the real full whatever the resistance was there. So before that, I didn't know how to train this way because that's why we used progressive resistance, so to speak, whatever it means. So we get warmer and then we have better drills and stuff and people are ready for like our fully little bit go harder. But with set of constraints, I can now create a situation where people can't hurt each other, even if they want to, and then everybody gets warm, and then I just let them top person more loose. We did also this that you only can hold underhook and let them do reverse underhook, only cross face, but not locking, So we can give them different constraints, so they can still do the realistic reverse underhook, but it's, so now for me that was the one that I didn't get it because I think we talked about it that, okay, how do you do it like, always full resistance or potential of full resistance and whatever the theory you said about, how much you change your resistance and is it actually full or, it's always progressive in that sense. But that was really confusing for me because it's like, I felt like if I do it, now I know how, but before I was like, I'm putting people in a unnecessary risk because people go hard, in the first minute and then people get hurt because clearly their body is not ready. But now with the constraints and stuff, I was like, oh my God, I can actually create like real resistance, so to speak, sparring, applicable, transferable, things in the first minute, And so that was, for me, was a really big, epiphany, so to speak, that how to create and then also what happened in our gym, when we did it, I think we started a couple of months ago. First, people are not used to this task focus stuff. And then everybody goes like super hard all the time, like in a red, because they're used to it, like sparring is sparring, And what happened now is I think after 2 months now, I think what we call it, that's common, not in Estonia it's called phone, but common certain thing like lowered, People, let's say if they play with a 70 something, they don't go to the red. But let's say in a 70% range, they get a full they get a full realization what will happen, and they don't have to go 100 all the time, because during the certain degree already resistance, the reality comes out,
Yeah.
And so it's like they're staying more 70, 80, and it's like it's calmed down because they know how to train that way. So that was the first time, because my buddy Ronald also said, like, the first class looked like a mess. People were like, going super hard. I was like, what the hell is, like, this is a madness, And then I knew it was a first class, so people are not adapted to this, and all this task focused stuff threw them out, because now they had to think for themselves, I said them, do this, those are the rules, figure it out, And they were like, but that's it, that they were looking for specifics, and they're not used to training this way. But now I really enjoy that it's calmed down a little bit, and people are like understanding what the job is, and how hard they have to go, and where they get the most benefit, because always 100% going to red, it's a risk of injury is so big. So 70, 80 is already when you get a good workout also, and reality, you meet the reality. If you go like 50, whatever, lower, then you can cheat with the reality. Not always everything works the way it does.
It's not representative. All right.
Yeah. So that's happened in our gym. So that's interesting.
I got 3 things. 1, welcome to the dark side.
Yeah.
So welcome to the dark side. Good.
Yeah.
2, that's exactly what I've been telling you guys. I'm glad you can see it now. And 3, if your students are getting hurt, that's your fault. So it has nothing to do with the level of resistance. Nobody gets hurt here. Okay. So again, this is why understanding how to use the method is so important. This is why I urge it so much. This is why I'm telling people, read, learn, don't think you know everything, because if you're going to use something new, you can't just be willy-nilly about it. You have to really put some effort into understanding its effect, right? And luckily I've been at this for 8 years. I'm not just discovering this for the first time. So I had all the troubles that you guys are talking about. And this is why that's what I'm trying to convey to people. This is why I'm so direct about it. But that's good. I'm glad you saw what I've been saying. It's great.
Yeah, this is that's what I mean, like existential issues, because now I feel like, what's my job? Now I have to be a coach. I have to know what is the likable outcome, how to build games that gets people to the level. So now it's the hard part is actually coming up with games.
To actually be a coach. Rather than replicating DVDs and what your instructor told you, now actually have to know something, and now you have to actually be a coach. That's fucking hard shit, right? You know what I'm saying? Like everyone talks about what about it being hard? Come on, man. Of course.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. It's a daily struggle.
And then for me was really interesting, like my friend also, I think you know him, Greg, Francesco Fonte, who's been doing also ecological approaches.
I haven't spoken to him yet, but people have been bringing him up to me.
So he was, but what struck me was this, that he was doing a close guard drill, and maybe the third constraint task was in a close guard, try to put the bottom person knee on a mat, try to pin his knee. Mm-hmm. And I was very surprised about that task, because you can cheat the task. You can put your side on a mat, because that imitates the knee on a mat, and people don't let you. So it creates really weird side effects actually from bottom person, because they're gonna shrimp in a bottom, avoiding putting the knee on a mat. Because I told him, like, I would actually think if you do teach close guard top, I would have said instead of putting the knee on a mat, I would have said, okay, open the legs, And then that would be my, jiu-jitsu brain would say, very specific, open the legs, because that's how you get a leg open. But what happened when he said knee on a mat, what happened was people were actually pushing knee on a mat, legs were opening, actually, because during the process. And some of them, because they had to keep the knee on the mat, they also put their knee over it, And right away, certain knee pinning movement emerged that would be easy to teach, guard pass later. And people Francesco didn't teach that. People figured out right away themselves that they have to put the knee over so the knee stays pinned,
Right.
So that was, for me, was like that kind of very vague, put their knee on the mat, created actually desirable outcome that I would never thought. So for me, it was hard that I knew that, oh shit, because I have to change my thinking, because I would think open the legs, But then push the knee on the mat actually creates better outcome. I could never thought of.
Why? So again, I don't know about that constraint. Like I have my own way of doing it, but either way, because your buddy gave them a task. You just told them an objective. If we don't have both,
Yes.
it's going to get confusing. So if you just say open the legs, do you know how vast that is? What do you mean open the legs? So, but if you say put the knee on the mat, every human can do that. Everyone knows what knees are and they know what the mat is. Put it in the mat. And so this gives them an opportunity to explore that situation, performing that task. So whether we can look at it with the effect it had, if it's a good constraint or bad constraint, but either way, it was externally focused and we were trying to produce an effect. And so that allowed the student to focus their intention and attention more clearly. And that's why his task constraint was effective for whatever you thought it was effective for. But we also have to be a little bit careful, because something that will happen is something called gaming the game. So if the constraints don't battle each other, like the defensive and offensive constraints, then students will start gaming it. They'll literally start like avoiding the engagement to win. And so this is another a difficult part, is when we start to create these games, we have to get students fighting over the thing we know that the situations arise for. So the positioning they're fighting over. So we need to equalize that. So there's no gaming of the game, right? And then we have to be careful. Oh, sorry.
Gaming the game would be also because, I guess the rule was to put at least one of their knees on a mat, but also if you could just pull mount from the guard top, and then the knee was on a mat, but then people got smart and they landed knees off the mat mount, and so people only do it like once because it looked goofy because somebody just dived to the mount bottom, but it got right away weeded out. Because it was a warm-up part of the class. Because also I really much liked it. I did a test also in my gym. It happened the same way, by the way. And but what I liked was it was goofy, because you could actually, push the knee on a mat. You could tilt your body, put your hip on a mat, and their knees on a mat. You could throw yourself to the mount bottom in a way. So it was a beginning stage of the class. So it was goofy. It was funny. It was like, warm-up attitude, so to speak. And then certain bad behaviors right away got weeded out, and then people actually had to still push the knee on a mat and open the legs. So that's what I mean. For me now as a coach, now I'm like, oh shit, I have to figure out really how do I talk about it, What is the actually I think, like open the legs. No. What is the behavior that drives this opening the legs, Not give them, so that is I find
the
very,
function.
Very hard. Yeah.
You're trying to understand how the mechanics, tactics, and functions relate.
Yeah, totally different way of thinking about what my job is to teach them, So it's like, that is very like challenging. I love it. I feel like a fucking beginner,
Good, because most of us are beginner coaches when we first start. For some reason, we trick ourselves into thinking because we might be able to perform the function of Jiu-Jitsu relatively well that we know something about talking about it, or that we know something about getting other people to perform it. That's just a fault. That's faulty thinking. So like when I started this back in 2014, I realized like I didn't know what I was doing. And like that, telling myself, you don't know what you're doing. So you need to look at people who do. That was transformative for me because it gave me the freedom to start exploring again. It made me excited about what I could potentially learn about that process. So again, coaches who think they already know what they're doing just because they're black belts, you don't know what you're doing. I've seen your students. You have no idea what you're doing.
Were you the coach also that taught step-by-step techniques?
I did. Yeah. I came from Lloyd Irvin. Okay. Everything was drilled out step by step. I mean, everything.
But how do you explain? Because Lloyd, all after this scandal and stuff, but his guys are doing actually pretty good, but they do very specific things.
Yeah.
Do they drill very specific things? Okay, they move span. Okay.
They move span. But Lloyd does a lot of things well. And the first thing he does is he creates a strong culture of effort. If you've ever competed against or trained with a Lloyd Irvin guy, they go 150% from start to finish, and they don't care where they're at. They're so confident that they're going to get to their position and beat you with their position. They'll find any way to get there. So Lloyd creates a very good culture in that aspect, right? Work hard, be here for each other, do what you're supposed to do, know your weaknesses, know your strengths. So he creates this like really strong mentality. Now, I think his training methods are antiquated, but because his culture is so strong, but because the ecological system is functioning all the time, you can still get good like that. I mean, look at Atos. Like, that's the most chaotic group of winners I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? But they win. So, I mean, again, you can win the game many ways. But what do we want the outcome of our students to be? Do we want to create good grapplers, good players who understand the function of the game they're playing, or do we just want to create winners, right? But no, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people win, and it's not just because they're good.
What do you mean by chaotic Atos?
All right. If you had to say if you had to describe their jiu-jitsu in one word, how would you describe it?
I don't know.
You don't
High
watch
level, I
those
guess.
guys? Ooh.
The high level. Rutolos, Duarte, high level typically, I would say. They're there. They're always in the podium. They're winning shit.
For sure. I would say negation. They are strong, energetic people who stall their faces off. Except the Rutola brothers. They're different. They really are different. But most of their guys are strong, they're conditioned, and they will stay in their position and do nothing for extended periods of time and win by small criteria. They're stallers, but they stall effectively. They're effective stallers. They can win the game by doing nothing. Pushing each other, throwing themselves at their opponents. Look at their matches. I watch all their matches. It's like, oh, it's brutal. But it works. They can win at the highest level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Lloyd Irvin does the same thing, but his guys are a little bit different because they do have a culture of like exploration in a sense. So they're not as boring to watch.
Okay, so I want to go back around a little bit to harass you something because and also I'm totally fine if you can't give me the straight answer, but I'm doing it because I need to understand something, and you can still give me that I can't answer that answer.
Okay.
So you said about all the bent arm bars, straight arm bars, and everything, yeah. So I'm back to this Tarikoplata stuff because there's something I'm missing.
You love that, man. It must be a thing for you.
No. I'm saying because it's. I'm asking because it's obvious that that I'm asking. That's why because obviously armbar and kimura. I have an easier time creating this with those drills. Understand? Yeah. If we do this constraint stuff and tell people how everything is bent, kimura. I'm asking this because kimura emerges pretty fast, But I'm asking you this: that would you create a situation? But I'm trying to find the line of specificity, whatever the word is.
Specificity.
Yes, it's hard for me to say it. Would you create, or does your drilling create a Tarikoplata emergence in your gym, or you just don't care? And if somebody picks it up. See it somewhere. How do you bring Tarikoplata into your gym? Because clearly it's a submission. You have to know that's going to happen. You guys need to, even in a late stage. I know early is the same as Kimura, but in a late stage you need to know how to defend it, maybe. So is there, or do you just don't care about it? And if people don't know about it, it's totally fine. And then, so okay. I'm asking, where's the line?
Okay. So do you realize you just asked me 3 questions in one, right?
I know. I'm passionate,
I know. Fuck, how do I answer this? If it emerges in my gym and people start doing it to each other, that's fine. It will work itself out within the gym. I don't need to focus on it specifically.
Okay.
I would not create a constraint for that. The constraints that I create for how we merge the submission system, straights, twists, and strangles, how we merge that together, we use the concept we call physical certainty. So the idea is that if you had a button that you could press to put yourself in a position where you were most likely guaranteed to finish, like the statistical significance of you finishing was very high, okay, like the probability was very high, what types of situations would you create? And so we have one that we focus on heavily. It's creating what we call the arm in, arm out scenario, or head and arm or triangle. You can use all that language to describe the same thing, but specifically by getting our legs involved. So if you think about all the submitting positions in Jiu-Jitsu, the triangle and all of its formations, where there's a head and arm trapped together in between your legs, is an extremely probable situation to submit somebody from. So this is something I would like to see emerge in my room. So because it takes three threats and it merges them together. So the threat of twisting, the threat of straightening, the threat of strangulation, you can put into one system. So we create constraints around recognizing and creating this scenario and then using this scenario to win matches. Okay, so that's as deep as I go. That is specific as I go. And I do not show this is that. Okay, so we look at them independently. Okay, we look at the arm lock breaking situation, the Kimura breaking situation or the figure 4, and the head and arm strangle situation. And then we play games from varying degrees of alignment and we search to create this by focusing our students' intention and attention on creating it through task and objective. Okay, so that's as specific as I get. Okay, I don't care if the Tarikoplata shows up. I'm never going to talk about the Tarikoplata. I don't think it matters. To me, it's a waste of time. That's the first answer. The second thing I want to talk about is you said I need to know it because it's going to happen to us. Not at all. We play a zero-sum game. What is good for me is bad for you. What is good for you is bad for me. So what we do is we teach our students how to create these meta-stable regions of state space, where we teach our students how to engage in such a way that those things we have to look out for can never show up. Because if I'm always doing to you what is going to benefit me, then you're always in a situation that does not benefit you, and vice versa. So we teach our students how to position and grip fight into these metastable regions so we can deal with novelty. So novelty will always emerge. This new fancy leg lock, this new fancy arm lock, all of it will emerge. But if we understand these, again, stable regions and know how to manipulate them, we become immune to novelty. And so I know this, and so we do that with all of our students. So we don't have to worry about ever talking about the potentiality of facing a Tarikoplata. And again, I do not believe in other than the state early escapes or late stage. Listen, the degree between early and late is so fine. When do we start to define that? So instead, we just work at two ends. If we want a student how to understand how to defend themselves from a twisting lock, we put them in a twisting lock, whatever the alignment is that you want, and we get them to focus on breaking it down based on its invariants, connections, angle, shape, whatever. And then we work on creating metastable regions, and those two things handle everything in between.
When you say meta-stable regions, you mean positions that, I know you said you control the novelty, nothing can happen because,
yep.
You've been there and you know what's going to happen there. That's what you're saying.
No. You don't need to know. So, okay, let's talk about less entanglements, right? Let's talk about entanglements because this is the easy. That's the terminology I haven't heard you use yet. The metastable regions. So that's what I'm asking. I've talked about metastability on many of my podcasts, but not with Jiu-Jitsu guys, because talking about metastable with people who don't know anything about ecology is confusing. So metastability is just a stable region of workspace where you can create many novel solutions to the problem you're facing. So the best way we can look at this in Jiu-Jitsu would be leg entanglements. So the precursor to all leg entanglements is inside position. So if we can teach a passing player to constantly keep the bottom player out of the inside of their knees, you never have to worry about entanglements because entanglements can't happen. They physically can't happen. If I can't get both of my feet in between your knees or one of my leg in between and the other behind, you can't entangle me ever. Ever. So I don't need to teach 1,000 different ways to escape heel hooks if you can never entangle me. And so we start there. And then we start on the opposite end too. We'll start our students in entanglements and they have to work back out to that metastable region. So we show the connection between the threatening situation we don't want to be in and the metastable region where we're never threatened, and we let them work in that space so they can learn how to manage it as novel situations arise against new players.
Yeah, you're making jiu-jitsu very, very dull.
No, I know. I say the same thing. You ever watch magicians, right? It's amazing when you go and they watch them float and everyone's clapping. They pay all this money to go in there. But if you went backstage, like, I just hung myself on a wire and hit it with some light, it ruins it, right? We want to be shocked and we want to be awed about the magic guy with the ninja scrolls who does the move we have to pay $400 for. Can you imagine going to a seminar and spending $400 to stand in front of your superhero and have him show you how to cross both your feet to separate their hands in an arm lock situation? I'd rather shoot myself. You know what I mean? And it's fun for people because they can sit there with their cardboard cutout of their superhero and they can say, hey man, look, I learned the magic arm lock from the king of arm locks. And they all get to clap and post on their social media and everyone feels cool about it. But the first time you unveil that there is no special way to do arm locks, there's only these 4 invariants to get to all of them. It's like, that's boring. I don't like that. I can't spend $400 on an answer. You know what I mean? It's just, it's cultural, man. We're dealing with a horrible cultural constraint that we need to smash down.
Because what I also been talking to some people is like now, I guess in the earlier days also when I was in SPG whatever, but now I especially feel because all the rules and stuff is said about pushing the knee and not saying open the legs. I would really love like some kind of like a, and I think in wrestling they do it like a coaching conference, let's say like because
I want that too.
it's really it's because let's say I would really like to see, let's say I would even pay money for that and stuff, like let's close guard. So you have your set of drills and stuff, like task and stuff. You have a group, this is our bubble. I have a games, blah 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 blah, and this is what we do, and forever, And so I would really love that I would have to not come up with after a year, experimenting with this and what works, what doesn't. If something already works and you have that bubble ready, those are the tasks. This is it. We play this game forever now till the end of time. And you have the 5-4 constraint-led games, and this is it. And then you can tweak it a little bit, add this, add your own spices.
Yep.
So that's, I think it's, for me, it's very valuable, or
okay,
like
freeze.
How do you do like a lot of yeah.
Yeah, so that's important. All sports, once they're well understood and well played, there's a redundancy that appears over and over and over again in all coaching methodologies. So this redundancy we're not used to in the Jiu-Jitsu community yet, because I'm the first person to create it. It doesn't exist yet. So that this obsession with those metastable regions and the simple foundational tasks that create them, I'm not saying they didn't exist before me, but no one put them in the package that I'm putting them in. And so this redundancy is like, oh, that's it. But you realize it's like that for every sport. So if you were to play football or basketball, you're going to face that same redundancy as you're learning how to play the basic game. And that redundancy will always be repeated, and there'll be a little bit of spice on top based on who you are as an individual. But that's it. That's why getting good is so hard and so monotonous as fuck. You do the same things over and over and over again, and you only change relative to how you need to change. But there's this redundancy at its base. It's the truth.
Yeah, so that's why I'm really interested in, like, because if you give them a wide base, all the behaviors with the personality stuff, everything will emerge. So I would be really interesting to to receive, not like because I want to cheat, whatever, because I still want to, because I would still check your material and try to go like, maybe we do like the fourth constraint-led game is I don't like it, I would tweak it a little bit. It has to be, because let's say nobody has done it before, so maybe there's a chance not everything is figured out to its core. And if there are 100 people, if 100 people giving you like a critical feedback about this, so it can be, but somebody has to do it first, and we have a material to criticize, or critique.
Right.
So I would be really interesting. That's why I said like, shit, we need like a coaches conference that somebody said, okay, this is how we teach this. We have 10 games, and this all the behaviors that you're looking for us, they're emerging from those 10 games, and so that would be like a really, really interesting.
Well, if you want to put that together, I'm ready to be that guy, because right now everyone else is almost 10 years behind. I've talked to everyone who's in this space. I mean, I'm talking to everyone. And there's a handful of coaches, like I said, Party Bear, I don't know his real name, but he's doing it. We've got Scott Save right over here doing it with MMA. We've got Cal Jones doing it for judo. So it's like parsed around, but nobody's like meeting together to try to pull it up. And like everyone I'm talking to doesn't even know the basic science, man. So again, it's hard. The community is behind. So, but if I could speed it up, I would. I would love to help. That's the whole point of me doing all this free shit.
No, it's usually like early adapters, and then the mainstream takes a while, because we have that mindset still. Like I just read it also. I think you talked to Alex KZ in my Facebook page or something, or he wrote something in Facebook.
We've spoken on the phone 2 days ago.
Yeah, and somebody wrote him, get to the purple belt, then you understand more, or something. And it was just some people like that's very, neglected whatever he was asking, because he's just a blue belt, So, but it's still, I think so I agree with you that, if you're a black belt, in what world would you think that you know anything about teaching, Because why would you even assume that you're good in doing? That's why you're a black belt. But doing and actually passing on the skill or making other people better, it's a totally different skill than getting good yourself, So,
For sure.
so it's very like it's still assumption in jiu-jitsu world that you've got a black belt open a gym and now you know what you're doing. Sometimes people even don't know how to run a business because they're just good at doing jiu-jitsu, not running business, not passing on the art. So I feel I don't know why I'm naturally curious about this stuff, so it doesn't come really hard to me. I've seen your stuff, then I think about it, I see some point, then it's taken me like over half a year to figure out and watch videos and finally implement it, because I don't want to jump in and there's nowhere to hurry, so to speak, and I don't want to be like an ass. Just okay, what he's talking about? Think about it, and finally I was ready to implement. So, but it's not like I'm saying it's not. I'm always looking for something that I can improve, and I know I don't know everything. So for me, it's natural, but I don't know why actually you or somebody else that tries to advance the teaching gets resistance. That everybody's like, no, my coach did it this way, and this is how we done in 50 years, and it's like
they're taking it as a personal attack because they want to feel like they're good, or they don't want to be told they don't know what they're doing. Like, I like being like me and DeAndre, my black belt, had a conversation today, and it's something. And I don't want to talk. We're not going to talk about this because I'm doing something new. But I got checked on something that I was doing, and there was something I didn't realize in my method, and he made it very clear, and I was like, oh shit, you know what I mean? I'm failing at that level. So if we're not open to being failures or being wrong, then we're not open to anything, especially not change. So yeah, that's the problem. Okay, people already think they're good. They already think they're doing a good job. But the truth is the Jiu-Jitsu community now as a whole is just copying John Danaher's information and regurgitating it over and over and over again. That's it. It's all that's happening. So it's frustrating, right? Because everyone got excited about Danaher. They sound really cool because they can say something in an intellectual way. They copy something, the great, and they get to have a touch of greatness too. And so when you tell them you're wrong, by the way, even Danaher is now doing creative drilling. So everyone's on board now.
I saw that, yeah. Yeah, because
joke.
I think he's always done a little bit like that. I never got a sense. I know he's very thought out, like all these diagrams and stuff, whatever he has. But he always struck to me as a person that
he uses an analytical methodology.
Yeah, and also,
that's IP. It's on the other side of what I'm doing. I have listened to every interview he's ever been in. I've found old interviews from 2006, 2007, because when he inspired me to go on my own, like to just trust myself, I was like, oh man, I got to learn more about this guy. So everything I've learned, I learned all his leg stuff from one of his purple belts in 2015 when he came here and trained with me for a little bit. And he's been IP and he is IP, and again, if he does start talking about it, it's just because he's jumping
as much as I remember the Lex Friedman podcast, he said something about also like drilling and with the resistance and everything. So
drilling is nebulous. He said drilling is nebulous and it has no real definition. So the way the Jiu-Jitsu community is currently looking at drilling is not, it doesn't work. And so what he tried to do is he said drilling has to be implemented in such a way that has an effect on the athlete. And so what he said is that he teaches his students how to drill.
Okay, but do you think does he do resistance tasks something?
So the reason, I think John Danaher is effective for two reasons. One, they do a lot of live work, and they do situations. They shrink it down, they thin slice it, and they hyper focus on with a strong understanding of mechanics and tactics and strategies. And John Danaher is an intelligent man who clearly sees what's going on in a grappling environment and in fighting. Period. Right? He's a very knowledgeable guy who can articulate his thoughts well. That and, like I said, live work. You put those two things together, that's a strong combination. And don't forget, he's famous. So highly motivated good guys are all packing into his room. Like it's a melting pot for skill. He could potentially remove himself from the situation and skill would still come out of that. You know what I mean? So no, that's why he's effective.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so every question I'm asking you're Greg, you're not giving me an answer. Yeah. Hey, wait,
Sonny, come on, man. Ask the question clearly so I can look. Don't you do that to me? He's gonna wait till like 9:59, and he's gonna be like, "Okay, you didn't answer me, but I'll talk to you later." No. I'm not leaving this motherfucker until I answer your question. Sonny, help out, man. Come on, help us, Sonny.
Look, I do think there's just a way of that you're talking that makes understanding it more difficult than perhaps it needs to be.
Tell me. Tell me.
Okay. So, for instance, we agreed that there is no, like, you don't know what it means when someone goes a maximum effort, right? But then when describing how a competitive advantage that Team Lloyd Irvin has, you said everyone gives 150%. And so if I was to attempt to explain why that, maybe could be a contradiction, I think my understanding of it is that you're saying because you cannot prescribe maximum effort to a room of people in any form of accuracy, because everyone's maximum effort is going to be different. Because you can't prescribe that to them, you don't know what that looks like, or you don't know what that is. But you could colloquially say these guys go 150%.
Exactly right. So I can clarify the contradiction very easily. So yes, I was using the word 150% in two different. 150% is a representation of full effort and plus some. Okay, they do everything they can to win. That's what I mean by 150%. I don't know if it's actually 150%. It could only be 73, but they're so good they make it work. I don't know. But the other thing I do know about Lloyd's Room is they do a lot of high urgency games. They do a lot of 30-second blasts, 90-second blasts, 2-minute blasts, where they literally will create a scoring situation and they have to go. You know what I mean? And so they actually train that skill. They train that skill of being intense. But training the skill of being intense is different than from being intense. So if I have a 10-minute round and I put you in a situation and I say, hey, this is the outcome I give in that 10-minute situation will control the urgency so that there is no like 100% effort, because there can't be. And even if there were, we don't know what that is, and neither does the student doing it. So that's all I'm saying is if we use it for an objective measure, we can't name it. But if we want to train it, there are objective measures we can use to train what we think we're saying.
I gotcha. But then my guess is just that distance between the ability to prescribe it into a room and just how we could use something colloquially is probably what leads to the feeling of Priit that the question's not getting answered.
No. I said it by a joke. It's a joke because I know myself that what he means, but he can't answer that question because I just wanted to see how specific I can go, and when does it stop? When Greg says something, and then it's still I have to certain things I have to figure out how to actually articulate it. Maybe I send Greg some messages afterwards, because that's my problem, that articulating question. Because in a way, I like to say that it could be anything. Now it was Tarikoplata. It's like we were pushing with this. Is it like so? That's what the question was about, specificity, whatever the word I guess.
Specificity.
So yes, still can't say it. It's like I was trying to what's the goal? Because my question, actually, the big one is again, what is my job, and then what do I have to teach? And I'm also limited by my experience right now, because I don't think I can create a situation where all those things are necessary are emerging. Yeah. So I have my limitation because I have 2 months only practice.
For sure, but also too, you have to remember your limitations will be based on your definition of what you think you need, where you need to get them. So this is why I use a very general approach, because again, I don't know how specific we need to get. Nobody does. So we start off with generalities, right? So first, the objective of the game. How do we define the game? Immobilization as it leads to strangulation or breaking. This is important because any action taken for progression is to get closer and closer to immobilizing our opponent so we can strangle and break them. Any act of resistance will be resistance of exactly that, maintaining mobility so we don't get strangled and broken. So that's the big general thing. So then we zoom in a little bit. We zoom in and we attack the periphery. That's the head, arms, and legs, to gain access to center mass. That's the hips, chest, shoulders, and back. So now we've taken that big general immobilization, strangle, and break, and we zoomed in a little bit. So okay, but how do we go about doing that? Well, we take actions that we have to fight the periphery, like I said, head, arms, legs, to get to the center. And then once we get to that center, we have to put it on the floor. We have to further immobilize it so we can isolate limbs, we can strangle and break them. So we can zoom in a little further. Okay, so now we have to start performing actions. Which actions do we perform? Well, if we're talking about the periphery, because that's where we have to start, what alignments, what's connections, what's alignments, what movements allow us to help or start to initiate that immobilization process, even if it's in a small way. So 2-on-1 on the wrist is more immobilizing than not touching somebody. Grasping my hands, double underhooks around your shoulders, is more immobilizing than 2-on-1 at the wrist. So you can see that there's this progression from a big general approach zoomed in to a general task focus, and then even more to the generalities of the functions, that they have a scaling nature where they go from what we would consider less controlling to more controlling based on our goal of immobilization. So you just keep zooming in, but you can't get rid of the big picture, which is immobilization is what we're doing for the purpose of strangulation and breaking. It's super simple. So again, that's why, so the only things that are necessary are things that get us close to that end or resist being put at that end. And we start very general and then we zoom in as we go.
Yes, let's say, like, I'm still, I'm also a little bit brain dead right now and I have to go. This is, I find this 2-hour talk is very useful because now I have to understand I'm saying again, my job, because I'm asking because I thought my job was to teach, Tarikoplata, omoplata, everything else, but now it seems like, as much as I've done it 2 months and thought about it longer, is like now its question is, okay, what is my job? So that's for Roland also is like, we're like, okay, what is our job actually now here? Because first we were thinking about, omoplata, Tarikoplata, armbar, triangle choke. So there's certain fundamentals we have to put people in, but then it's like some periphery movements that, is it our job to teach it? Is it our job to expose people to it? Maybe they saw it in a video, maybe, somebody picked it up by nature. So it's like that definition is it's a little bit hard to understand for me and I have to struggle, but it's my problem. So that's what I mean. It's like my definition of what my job is has changed. And that is really actually hard to deal with after all those years. And it's not like I'm not going to change, but it's like I have to rethink so many things for myself. And because I really enjoy the 2 months of actually teaching this way, and I see the benefits. I know people like it, but then other I'm not saying that they're right when they say it, but some people say, are we not learning any techniques anymore? Because they're used to the old methods. Yeah, but there's different, because now it's like figuring stuff out, and it's the technique stuff is different than compared to how we did before, like specific sweeps or something, So, so that's how I did it before. So the change is a little somewhat radical also. So that's why it's hard.
Again,
I think.
I think the most radical thing that's happening is that your perception of what's happening is changing. So
yeah.
So even when you were teaching all those specific things you just named, if you were not teaching those things and also teaching making, maintaining connections, manage distance destabilization as it relates to immobilization as it leads to the outcome, then you weren't actually teaching anything. Because no matter what move you decide to show, there's a foundational basis of function. Because how can we define what we're doing if we don't know what the function of the outcome is? How do we even get started? Right? So again, it's just what you think, they're not you, sorry, excuse me, the general you, the public, all the jiu-jitsu community thinks that. Well, no, I don't, because I don't mean you, because I know that you're trying to organize this in your mind.
I know.
What I mean is that, again, this is the equivalent of trying to teach someone a math problem by getting them to memorize solutions and never telling them that addition is A plus B equals B plus A. If you are not helping them understand that, you can't teach someone how to add effectively. And I mean that as if we were to take that arithmetic and we were to extrapolate it out into higher level math. But either way, you have to teach the function, because all our moves have a function. If we're not teaching that, we're not teaching anything.
So that's what I mean. It's like, thank you, Craig, for letting me know that I haven't done my job for 22 years.
You're welcome.
And I guess it's it is like a little bit joke and emotional statement and stuff, but it's also I'm actually really happy that that this stage I'm in, and this is very challenging, and this is I think very important that I found after 23 years being in game, and I found this. I want to mingle with it. I want to understand it better, because I'm also very sad because ecological approach has been around quite a bit, as a science already, and I'm very sad that it has taken, even Jiu-Jitsu world or whatever that, and it's also my fault that I haven't looked for it probably to reach this state that, we're trying to understand it and bring it to our sport, because clearly it has merit. So anyway, so I have to go right now because we can blabber it but I think for 2 hours. I think for 2 hours, it's not. I'm not gonna stop this by saying, "Oh, we didn't reach anything." I think it was an important conversation. What I think, Sonny, you would agree that we got it something from here.
I definitely think so. I'm happy to be able to share that conversation with everyone, and I'm happy to also just shut up and listen to you guys go back and forth. I think it was good. You had enough. Yeah. We thought you'd agree on a lot more, maybe. And maybe you still did agree, but you had enough good questions there, Priit, to get a good response.
And this is for me necessary to understand something, and then probably I will message Greg again. So this is continuous conversation, and I'm really interested. So I'm looking forward what will come for Jiu-Jitsu community for this, and I'm interested to understand this method and dig deeper also to what are the literature and stuff, and it's really interesting.
Well, yeah, so thank you guys for asking the questions. Thanks for having me on. And Priit, since I've shifted your paradigm so much, I feel responsible for you. So do not stop messaging me, man. I'm serious. I've been trying to get in contact with you. I know you're a busy man, but I want to share everything that I've discovered with you so you can hit the ground running and so you can avoid some of these pitfalls that I fell into. So, man, you please use me as a resource.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All good.
All right.
Very happy.
Well, let's wrap it up here. I will, Priit, if people want to contact you, I believe it's Priit Mihkelson on Instagram and defensivebjj.com. And you do have all the BJJ Facebook, Fanatics releases.
Facebook, Priit Mihkelson, I'm pretty active there. Instagram, more in stories. So those are the good. And also, I guess the YouTube stuff is a Globetrotters in Action YouTube, where a lot of my classes are filmed, and then and hopefully in the future also more I'm teaching the class using the ecological approach.
And Greg, where people want to find you, they've made it this far. They've been accused of throwing shit at the wall. Where do they go?
People are just soft. Anyway, at GD Souders and at Standard Jiu-Jitsu. We also have a YouTube as well. It's just Standard Jiu-Jitsu. We're starting to put some content in there and to help you guys move along and understand this method a little better. So, yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much. It's been an honor to sit here and listen. And Priit, I know you got to run, so hopefully I'm sure these conversations will continue.
Yeah, they do.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.